Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be talking about the Dark Souls Trilogy. This video is going to be a lore video, a basic lore video, an overview for those who are getting back to the game and just want a little re-education about it. And it'll be for new players, mainly for new players, but if you're a returning fan, welcome back. And please enjoy. Remember to like and subscribe. Before we begin, I just want to say a big thank you to From Software for the masterpiece after masterpiece. Their games have impacted the gaming industry as a whole for so many years, and I cannot wait to play what game they have in store for us next. The Dark Souls Trilogy is easily one of the best trilogies as a whole ever made, in my opinion. It's up there with Lord of the Rings for me, and I love Lord of the Rings as much as the next person. I still remember my first Souls game. Playing through it was great. It was Elden Ring, for those who want to know. I got it for free of the PS5, back when it first somewhat released, a bit after Christmas. It was the first game I played on the PS5 as well. But I do remember my first two attempts at playing the game, I gave up. I went hollow. I didn't know where to go, what to do. Perhaps I was too used to the games holding my hand for everything, I don't know. On my third attempt, I said to myself that I wouldn't give up, so I didn't. I kept going and going until, by chance, and a bit of YouTube tutorials, I must admit, I found the site of grace that you got to talk to Melina for the first time. And from there on, the rest of the path was somewhat explanatory. Go to Stormvale Castle, get a great rune, become Elden Lord. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's another video for another time about Elden Ring. After I'd finished the base game of Elden Ring, the DLC wasn't out at this time, I then wanted to play another playthrough of Skyrim, a game that I considered my favourite game of all time. Elden Ring then challenged that. But something felt off. I couldn't really explain it, so I tried playing other games, multiplayer games with some friends, but I was still left with that feeling like... it was the best way I can describe it was From Software had scratched an itch I did not know I had. From then I couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards. I had to play more games made by From Software, so I did. I bought the Dark Souls Trilogy box set with all the DLCs from CX for just under £40. Not bad, I'd say, looking back on it now. Got back home, put Dark Souls 1 in, installed it, and I played it. Once I had finished my playthrough of Dark Souls 1, I then moved on to Dark Souls 2. I know there's a lot of controversy around whether or not it's good or not. With their quality over quantity, gameplay was a bit at times, but one thing for sure, the lore is still top notch. I hate to admit it, but I didn't finish Dark Souls 2, and it's going to be difficult for me to do so because I simply just don't like the movement. I hate the movement. It feels like a compass with only 8 directions I can face. It felt restricting in a way. So I moved on to now my favourite Souls game, Dark Souls 3. I loved absolutely everything about the game. I played through all the DLCs, I watched hours of content on YouTube, people just talking about the game and the trilogy as a whole. I was simply obsessed with the game. So in my own way, I'm giving back to the community for the help I received along the way through my travels from the Undead Asylum to the ruins of the Ring City, where the two most important people fight over the remnants of the Dark Soul. Dark Souls 1 opens up with a very iconic cinematic which tells us about the world and how it came to be. It shows us the time of ancients, where everything is shown and described as grey and depressing, which could actually be hinting at Dark Souls 3, but... Anyways, the time of ancients was filled with more dragons than times I died to the bed of chaos. Worst boss fight in the game, easily. Then the first flame appeared, and it brings disparity,
came disparity. Eat.
Cold, life and death.
Life and death. And of course,
But along with the most obvious, light and dark.
Then from the dark they came.
The souls of lords were found, and we were introduced to
within the flame.
Nito. Might be pronounced that wrong, but who cares?
Nito,
Nito, the first of the dead.
The Witch of Islith.
Witch of Islith, along with her daughters of Chaos.
Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight.
Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, along with his royal and faithful knights.
And the furtive pygmy.
And last, and arguably least, the furtive pygmy.
With the strength of lords.
After they received the strength of lords, they challenged the dragons who ruled the earth for God knows how long. Gwyn used his towers of sunlight to destroy the dragon's stone skeletons, granted them their immortality.
Witches wooed great firestorms. Nito unleashed a miasma of death and disease. And Seath the Scaleless betrayed his own.
Which then brings us to Seath the Scaleless. He betrayed his own kind because he didn't have these scales that brought him mortality. He was jealous. And eventually this unlikely alliance of lords and Scaleless dragon drove the rest of the dragons to near extinction and would later be hunted for sport by Gwyn and his court. Thus began the Age of Fire, a prosperous time where peace reigned. However, the Age of Fire would end eventually and bring in the Age of Darkness. You see, the Age of Fire is only meant to be a temporary thing. It shouldn't be dragged out. But by the time we get to present day, where the actual first game begins, only mere embers reign of the first flame, and the world is suffering for it. We then learn about the dark side, which is the thing that causes humanity to never be able to truly die in a sense. Gwyn made this, and cursed humanity of it, out of fear to be usurped by the chosen undead. Not being able to die, and being in this dark and depressing world causes those of the undead curse to go hollow. For those who don't know what that is, the most basic way I think I can explain it to you is when they give up and lose their minds, which is what happens to every player character when they quit the game before completing it. That's what I like to think anyways. So in a way, by that my logic, every undead you see could be another player who failed in their quest. The actual player's story starts in the undead asylum,
the dark side,
locked in a cell, close to going hollow, as evident by their face. No matter how you customise your character, your face will be like this at the beginning. Unless you do New Game Plus, but... Anyways, a corpse falls from the ground from above, to the ground from above. And you look up and there is Oscar, Knight of Astoria. And he walks away. On the corpse there is a key to the cell door, and you walk out and you eventually come across the asylum demon. And you're prompted to flee by a sign left by Oscar. These signs are also left by other players, in a way to help you, give you a laugh, and just some joy cooperation. Once you leave the boss room, the next segment is the tutorial, and you eventually meet Oscar again, properly this time though, but he's gravely injured and he says he's about to go hollow. Gives you his Estus flasks, which are the healing items in Dark Souls Trilogy. He tells you of a prophecy that an undead, which is what the player is, to find their purpose must ring the 2 bells of awakening. Just after you leave Oscar, Knight of Astoria, behind, you do return to kill the Asylum Demon, which is a nice way to introduce you to the boss fight mechanics of Dark Souls 1. They're slow, but easy to get the hang of, in a sense. Once you leave the actual boss room, you get to the top of a ledge. A giant bird, crow, raven, grabs you and takes you to the hub world, Fire Shrine, where you'll spend quite a lot of time. Now, from what Oscar told you, your next goal is to bring these two bells of awakening. So you go through the undead burg, you fight the Taros demon, you meet everyone's favourite Sunro, Solaire of Ostora. He gives you the ability to partake in, as he says, jolly cooperation. You get to summon other players, you can leave your summon sign down, so if anyone needs help along the way with any particularly difficult bosses, you can use it and you can find help. Once you finally rung the final bells of all the bells of awakening, all 2 of them, you get access to Sen's Fortress. This is basically a giant sword trap. It's a difficult place to get around for your first playthrough, and later playthroughs too, as I found out the hard way. Once you reach the top and kill the boss, and interact with an item, a glowing item on the ground, these 2 bat-like demons fly down and grab you and take you up. Up, and away, above the wall that's been towering over you since the beginning of your journeys through the undead burg, under the big sea. This is honestly one of the best moments in the game for me. Due to just the visuals and the music, it just hits the sweet spot. From there, you keep progressing and taking the Lord's souls from all the Lords of old until you reach the Kiln of the First Flame, where you ultimately face Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight. And for me, this is easily one of the best boss fights in any of From Software's games. Gwyn's boss fight is simply superb, both from a gameplay and lore perspective. You find Gwyn, but not as you would expect. He's gone hollow, which is ironic because he created the very curse which causes undead to go hollow. And another thing that I noticed, and heard from other people, his iconic theme, the pling pling plong sound. This whole soundtrack is made only from the white keys on a piano. This is because Gwyn was scared of the darker sound. As I just said, Gwyn has gone hollow. So you're not really fighting him at his full strength, merely a hollow shadow of his former self. Unintended, please excuse it. Even if you didn't pay attention to the lore and what was going on at all, I think you'd still have a sense of feeling that you're not fighting someone who's themselves, or even a god or a powerful being, because he's not. He's just an old man who's not scared. The fight itself is not too difficult, especially if you learn how to parry. Gwyn is one of the only bosses that can be parried, adding another layer of Gwyn, along being in his prime, and a sense of being pathetic in a way. Most, if not all, bosses in Dark Souls 1 are not in their prime and extremely weakened. Even the legendary Artorias himself is affected by the Abyss, and his sword arm is broken. Both of these fights are concerned in their own ways, especially with Artorias and Sif's story. Once you beat Gwyn, you have two choices. Both are technically canon as they both work with the story, although one is made rather disappointing and obsolete, as it turns out to be meaningless. A somewhat meaningless ending is when the player simply leaves the kiln with the first flame, and ushers in the Age of Darkness, or attempts to, and that means letting the first flame extinguish. However, Dark Souls 2 and 3 still occur, so that means if you did choose that ending, someone else came along and just lit the first flame without any problems. No trouble, apart from the few knights that might have still been around. The other ending, which is also the one that most people get, especially on their first playthrough, is after they beat Gwyn, they approach the bonfire in the centre of the boss arena and link the first flame, becoming the new Lord of Cinder and keeping the flame going, which prolongs the Age of Fire until the next being comes along to link the first flame and continue the everlasting cycle. We're now on to Dark Souls 2, the most controversial of the three games. The opening has a different approach to the other cutscenes of the Dark Souls games. It doesn't spell out immediately the backstory, it shows not just the backstory, it also shows the player character's journey to where the game takes place. It's not in order, it shows at first the player character in the shack with a bunch of fire
will have
heaters.
meaning, and you won't even care.
And then they start beginning to tell you about
then,
the world.
You'll be something
Now this world's
other
different
than
to the one from
human.
Dark Souls 1, as
A
an unknown
thing
amount of time
that
has
feeds
passed
on
since the first game.
souls, a hollow.
One of the Firekeepers speaks of
Long
a kingdom
ago,
called Dren
in a
Laird,
walled-off
which was built by
land
apparently a great
far
king.
to the north. A great king built a great kingdom. I believe they called it Drangleic.
And we see the kingdom spawning from what appears to be dragons, although
Perhaps
from the
you're
first game we
familiar.
know that the dragons are all but extinct.
How could you be?
She tells us that one day we will be stood
But
outside its
one
gate without
day,
knowing why.
You will stand
And makes a little
before its
remark about us
decrepit gate without really knowing
Having seen it
why.
before, although at this point the character has not seen it at all. Which was a bit weird. We're then shown the player character arriving to a ruin of sorts by boat and going through. Into the ruin, they encounter a big tree with lots of fireflies. The fireflies swarm around the place, igniting all the torches, flying across the lake ahead. The door opens, big stone door, a bunch of spirits, souls, spectres, ghouls, whatever you come out and absolutely swarm the place. And at the
Like
edge
a
of
moth drawn to a
the
flame,
ruin where the player is, they create a
your
whirlpool
wings will
like
burn
portal.
in anguish. Time after time.
The player character willingly steps out and falls into it.
Is your fate. The fate of the cursed.
Awake in a ruin. Well, another ruin, but a lot more alive looking room with grass and more peacefulness. Eventually they wake up. Once getting through the tutorial area, being the ruin, the player reaches a shack with the firekeepers from the beginning, and they tell you go hollow. They reward you for even knowing your own name, and give you a human effigy. Once asking you to look into it and into your past, they tell you it's depicting you. These firekeepers clearly have no faith in your mission to break the undead curse, and even laugh at you for attempting and usher you along your way. Eventually, you come across one of, if not the best hub in any From Software game, Majula, with one of the best teams. And you meet your firekeeper.
You're finished. You'll go hollow. But remember, hold on to your souls. They're all that keep you from going hollow. Oh, I'll fool you no longer. You lose your souls. All of them. Over and over again.
Soon after, you will continue and find the last giant, who is imprisoned by column and rubble, and they're immediately angered by you in particular. I mean, what have you done to this particular giant? Probably nothing of consequence. You also come across the reoccurring boss for the first time, with lots of potential. I think they should be included in the Night Rain like the way Morgoth is, as in they randomly appear and torment you. Anyways, I present to you the Pursuer. The Pursuer is kitted out as a kitted out force of nature. Eventually, we do learn of this previously mentioned Great King, King Vendrick, who slays all the bearers of the Lord's Souls, just like the player does in Dark Souls 1, and builds up Drangleic with their powers with the souls. He eventually falls in love with a woman called Nashandra, whose origins are mysterious and almost unknown. She warns him of a land of giants who pose a threat to his whole kingdom and everything he's built. So King Vendrick immediately goes on the warpath and beats them and takes something from them. Sadly, we never find out what this something is. But we do know it gives them the ability to create golems, which they use to help build his castle and the rest of his kingdom, which in turn further proves he and his kingdom's might. Afterwards, there's peace and seemingly prosperity, until the giants return for revenge, which is completely understandable. This segment has the player go back in time and helps fight in this battle and defeats the giant's leader, and they're imprisoned. Wait a moment. This is just the same giant you fight at the beginning. No wonder they're angry. We're the bad guys? The giant's attack left the kingdom in ruins, and the curse of undead is also returning at this point, causing many to go hollow. Queen Nashandra urges King Vendrick to take Gwyn's position and mantle by claiming the Throne of One, which is essentially where you can decide whether or not to continue the Age of Fire. You may wonder why Queen Nashandra is so eager for King Vendrick to gain and keep this power. That is because she is a fragment of Manus, of the Abyss, who's the main villain from the Dark Souls 1's DLC. She naturally seeks and desires more power because of this, and she wants King Vendrick's soul, so he can essentially become her puppet, Fortunately for us, and the rest of the world, King Vendrick sees through her lies and deception, flees the capital and locks himself away. He tells his brother, Aldir, Scholar of the First Sin, to seek out another solution to curing the undead curse. Aldir does some experiments involving archdragons, who existed before the curse and are therefore immune to it. Aldir does create the Emerald Herald, aka Shanala, sorry I forgot the pronunciation, as well as the ancient dragon you can find, which isn't really a dragon. Both are hybrids, one being human and dragon, and the other being giant and dragon. Although they are immune to the curse themselves, they couldn't make humanity immune, so these experiments were deemed unsuccessful. Sadly, King Vendrick goes hollow, and is still guarded by his loyal knights and servants by the time we reach him. With King Vendrick going hollow, that makes us the best candidate to take the Throne of One and relink the First Flame. However, there is another option. If you were to complete the DLCs, you will be able to travel to other lands with other kings with similar stories to both King Vendrick's and Queen Nashandra. The queens also being other fragments of Manos, and the kings being other people that tricked. Some of them were not as lucky as King Vendrick. After collecting all three of their crowns, you'll be able to fuse them together into an ultimate crown that will ultimately have a cure for the undead curse, but only for the wearer of said crown. There is no cure for humanity from this curse, and there's sadly nothing we can do to change that. The player character then goes to the Throne of One and saves both Nashandra and Aldir, but Aldir somewhat survives. And they're presented with two choices: to take the throne and relink the First Flame,
Great Sovereign, take your throne. What lies ahead, only you can see.
or to simply walk away, like in Dark Souls 1, allowing for another to take the throne and continue the Age of Fire. This core ending causes the player to listen to Aldir's advice and go with them to continue the search for a cure to the undead curse.
There is no path. Beyond the scope of life, beyond the reach of love. One could possibly await us.
Unfortunately, we know they're unsuccessful, due to Dark Souls 3. But maybe Aldir and the player character are still out there by referencing Dark Souls 3. We may not know. But there are clues. There are spells. There's a spell in particular in Dark Souls 3 which references Aldir. So you never know. We are now on to my favourite of the three games of the trilogy. That being said, it's Dark Souls 3. You know it, you love it. Known for its dark and depressing grey themes, I say grey as it's famous for being very grey in terms of colour, in my opinion it's also has some of the best lore, as well as the best boss fights, and gameplay. As everything is so much faster and more aggressive than the previous two games, which were slow, somewhat predictable, and it was so good that they essentially copy and pasted it into Elden Ring and Elden Ring Night Reign, just because it was that good. Sadly, Dark Souls 3 was robbed of the title of Game of the Year in 2016 by none other than... Wait, am I reading this right? Overwatch. Really? There are countless other more deserving games, such as, I don't know, Battlefield 1, Uncharted 4, Titanfall 2, Doom, The Witcher 3, Blood and Wine's DLC. But Overwatch? Really? I honestly don't know how it won Game of the Year. I'm honestly just disappointed with us as a society. Overwatch, Game of the Year, and you've got hundreds, well not hundreds, but far better games. I'm getting off track again, sorry. Dark Souls 3 was one of the best cinematics of any From Software game in my opinion. It gives us just enough information, but also not enough. We see the city of Lothric, and we are told of all the lands converging here. So that means Anor Londo and Drangleic are present here as well in some way.
In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words. The fire fades.
We're told that the fire, the first flame, is fading, and it doesn't have long before it is snuffed out after countless years of being kept alive on what appears to be essentially life support. The narrator says that the Lord of Cinders go without their thrones, meaning there is no longer a Lord of Cinder to relink the first flame. As a result of this, it's said the bells start tolling, and they reawaken the previous Lords of Cinder from their graves.
The bell tolls, unearthing the old Lords of Cinder from their graves.
Some lords that are shown, and are known, are Aldrich, Saint of the Deep,
Saint of the Deep.
Farron's Undead Legion, the Abyss Walkers,
Farron's Undead Legion, the Abyss Watchers.
and the Lord of the Profane Capital, Yorn the Giant.
And the reclusive lord of the profaned capital. Yorn the Giant. Only in truth?
We are told that they all forsake their thrones and refuse the call to relink the first flame, which then causes the bells to reawaken the Unkindled, who are described as nameless and unfit for Cinder.
And the unkindled will rise. Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be Cinder. And
We then get
sweetness
one of the game's most iconic lines, Ash, seeketh embers.
embers.
With that, the player character reawakens from their grave, and you progress through the tutorial. Face off against Ludex Gunbeard. After taking the coiled sword, that is the bonfire sword, that was impaled through their armour. Once defeated, you take the coiled sword to the Firelink Shrine just behind him, where we meet the game's Firekeeper, who will be with us until the end of the game. We are then teleported to the High Wall of Lothric, and eventually find and fight 4 of the Memorable Valley. Easily one of the most iconic Dark Souls soundtrack for someone who hasn't even played the games, due to it being used in various means. Once Vort has been slain, you push on until you reach your first Lord of Cinder, that being the Abyss Watchers, whom you find are in an endless loop of killing one another and rising again. Your next Lord of Cinder you face is Yorm the Giant. I, like many others, did Sigurd's questline and managed to fight Yorm with him so he could fulfill his promise he made to Yorm that if he was ever to give up his duties as Lord of Cinder, he would kill him, with a weapon that was specifically designed to kill Yorm.
I, Siegfried of the Knights of Katarina, have come to uphold my promise. Let the sun shine upon this Lord of Cinder.
Oh dear. Another dogged contender.
Eventually you will face against Lothric the Younger Prince and Lorien the Elder Prince, who are against what Lothric calls the Fire-Linking Curse and say, let it fade all into nothing.
The mantle of Lord interests me.
Let it all fade into nothing. Remember this line, as it's far more important than you may realise.
Legacy of lords. Let it all fade into nothing. You've done quite enough. Now have your rest. Dear brother, I am on my way. My brother, unyielding sword of Lothric's prince. Rise if you would, for that is our curse.
Later on in the game, you might come across another infamous boss. The Nameless King, firstborn of Gwyn, first Lord of Cinder, who also appears in Night Rain. He is an optional boss, although he is one I highly recommend and you shouldn't skip out on him.
Thank you.
Dark Souls 3 also has a few
They
DLCs that work a bit like Telltale episodes, as they build up to the ending
Just
at the
a
end of the
moment,
DLC,
then.
with recurring characters that you tend to love
Painting of
and even care about.
Arendelle.
The first DLC begins when we meet a slave knight, Gale.
Scrabbit, that is.
He tells us to touch a piece of rotten painting
Go
in order
on,
to help him.
take it. Touch it.
And we're transported to the painted world of Arendelle, which has its own cycle similar to the Age of Fire, but here, the rot is being prolonged and only fire can cleanse it. As we are the Ashen One, we would be able to burn away this rot, at least help to do so.
The ashes were...
Gale needs our help to do so. Of course, we accept. We know that the painted world is a place for those without purpose, so on our travels through this world, we will find many people from different walks of life and different backgrounds. We learn that a Sister Freed is allowing the Age of Rot to continue. After meeting this Sister Freed, we then meet the painter who's imprisoned. Once you go down to Sister Freed's basement, you'll be met with Sir Wilhelm, a loyal knight who uses weapons infused by the Abyss. Sister Freed was one of the three sisters of the same church.
Flickering once again.
Within the basement, you'll find the source of the flame, within the possession of Father Ariandel, who was essentially held captive by Sister Freed and has been convinced to hide away the flame. Shortly after you find him, Sister Freed arrives and begins one of the most difficult fights in Dark Souls as a whole, with not one, not two,
Father,
but 3 phases.
we have no need of thy flail.
The first phase as you fight off against her.
'Tis only the flame quivering at misguided ash. Please avert thine eyes. I will snuff out these ashes for good.
The second phase has you fight against the 2 of them, and in this phase you can summon Gale to assist you. In the third phase, Sister Freyd comes back to life and is engulfed by a black flame, and becomes even more difficult to kill. Once bested for good, the fire is free to rid the world of rot, and the painter is able to begin painting what she calls a new, cold, dark and gentler world. These paintings are made from blood, so Gale's role, to help the painter, will be to find suitable blood for this painting. In the next DLC, you travel to the Ring City, which is outside the painting. Gale was also in this DLC and has left messages guiding us, as he is there to find the blood of the Dark Soul, we find out. But before we actually get to the Ring City, we reach the Dread Keep. Here, the convergence of different places from time is at its worst. It's practically collapsing in on itself. Here there are numerous callbacks to other games from locations and enemies. Once towards the end, you fight the demon in pain, the demon from below. With Gale's help, of course, you two can kill the last 2 demons in the world, in what appears to be the original Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls 1, except it's deep underground. When they are both dead, one, the last one you kill, is reborn as the Demon Prince, the final demon. Once you kill with Gale, you have wiped out all of the demons completely, and they're just another casualty of the first flame being prolonged. Eventually, you do actually reach the Ring City, the home of the Pygmies, the ancestors of mankind, whom I mentioned as one of the bearers of the Lord's Soul in Dark Souls 1. They're forgotten for a reason. Gwyn gave the city to the Pygmies as a reward for their loyalty, but also to keep them as far away as possible, as Gwyn hated the Dark Soul. The city is also on essentially the edge of the world, but to ensure their loyalty, he left one of his daughters, Filianor, within the city. We eventually come across a dragon named Midir, who is a descendant of the archdragons of old. When you first face him, you get to knock him off his perch, and he falls to what seems to be his death. However, it's not as it seems, because later you can find him deep underground, and fight him as Dark Eater Midir, another one of the hardest boss fights in the trilogy. Midir was originally tasked by the gods to help fight against the Abyss, a bit like Artorias, and has been around since not long after the beginning, as it says, which I assume is the beginning of the world or even time. But Midir, much like Artorias, was driven mad by the Abyss, so you were forced to fight him. You do find Filianor asleep with an egg. Well, as I say asleep, it's a bit complicated, but essentially they're asleep. You touch this egg and it breaks. And there's a bright flash of light and you're transported to the end of time. Well, if the Age of Fire is continued further, this is what the future will be like. Well, the city is in ruins and only 3 people are still alive. You, the last dying pygmy, and the Red Hood. Gale has unfortunately been driven mad by consuming the blood of the Dark Soul of all the Pygmies for what seems to be a very, very long time. Gale has essentially been spending an unknown amount of time simply fighting and killing everything. And as he's been driven mad by the blood of the Dark Soul, and you have the Dark Soul within you, he wants to kill and eat you.
Your Dark Soul.
The fight is one of the best in the series and easily up there with my favourites.
For my lady's
And this is where the stupid saying, two two nobodies fighting over nothing comes from, which I think is completely false, and it should be something like two most powerful beings fighting over the dark side, which is more accurate. The fight has two phases, and in the second, Gale realises himself that he has the blood of Dark Souls, due to his own blood being corrupted by eating so much of the Dark Souls essence. This revelation grants him a sort of power boost, and makes the fight not only faster, but overall more difficult. You're not only fighting a friend who's been driven mad, but it's a fight to give him mercy, a merciful death.
Blood of the Dark Soul.
Gale is trying to kill you for the Dark Soul, as you have the last piece he essentially needs for it. For his painter, to create the new gentler world. Fighting Gale to me feels as if you're fighting an equal, as you both have overcome tremendous odds and killed countless beings stronger than yourself, to get yourself stronger. Anyway, so now back to the base game, towards the very end. Once all the Lords of Cinder have been returned to their thrones, in corpses mainly, aside from one,
Noble Lords of Cinder, the fire fades. And the lords go without thrones. Surrender your fires to the true heir. Let her grant death to the old gods of Lordran, deliverers of the first flame.
and their embers are then transferred to you, and then you must face the embodiment of Cinder itself, the Soul of Cinder. The Soul of Cinder is essentially an amalgamation of all the previous Lords of Cinder from the past. So by that logic, you're fighting your characters from Dark Souls 1 and 2, depending if you chose the canon endings. The fight is easily up there with Gwyn's boss fight for me. Wait a minute, was that the pling pling plong? No! By fighting every Lord at Cinder at once, it was inevitable that you were going to fight Gwyn again. For the Soul of Cinder's second phase, Gwyn manifests, and with the very familiar soundtrack seeping through and essentially overtaking most of the soundtrack of the Soul of Cinder, along with pretty much the exact same moveset from Dark Souls 1. The boss itself is very unique in the first phase especially, as the Fire Link sword they wield, the same as the Cold Sword you get at the beginning, transforms from a normal sword, a lance, a staff, a curved greatsword, and a greatsword. So the moveset changes for at phase 1. After slaying the Soul of Cinder, there are multiple endings you can choose from. For example, you can simply just let the first flame extinguish and usher in an age of darkness. In order to do this, you must do a quest line. This quest line is not that difficult, but essentially you summon the Firekeeper and she will let the flame extinguish. As it does, everything grows darker, even the screen. This ending is considered to be the canon ending and the good ending. Although the flame is no more, the Firekeeper says it will one day return, and the second Age of Fire will start, with the second flame. As I've previously mentioned a few times, the first Age of Fire was supposed to be a one-time thing, but instead it was dragged on for God knows how many years.
The first flame quickly fades. Darkness will shortly settle. But one day, tiny flames will dance across the darkness. Like embers linked by Lord's Pass. Ashen One, hearest thou my voice still?
There is another ending you can get which is linked to the last, but a much darker version. As the screen is starting to go black, if you were, I don't know, to attack the Firekeeper for whatever strange reason, she falls to the ground with the first flame still in her hand, and you forcibly take it from her as you crush her skull with your foot. A part of the opening narration begins to play as well. This ending is by far the most evil, as you portray the very person who has done nothing but assist you and help you through your journey. They've leveled you up, granted you knowledge, and has been just a friend to you. This ending is similar to the usurping ending, which I'll talk about next. This ending doesn't even grant you a trophy, as only the cruelest players seek this ending out and deserve nothing to show for it by doing it. The person who discovered this was either cruel or simply misclicked. I'll give them the benefit of doubt there. The Age of Fire doesn't end when all you do is relink it, but you kill your Firekeeper in the process.
Darkness will shortly settle. But one day, tiny flames will dance across the darkness. Like embers linked by Lord's Pass.
Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder. And so it is that ash seeketh embers.
In another far less depressing ending, You usurp the fire where you abduct Henry, who looks very familiar to Oscar back from Dark Souls 1, and form a rite of wedlock in a side quest. Once beating the Soul Cinder and link the first flame, your character collapses to the ground from the pain. And when they reawaken, everything is ash, even the bonfire before you. The sun now has a white glow, and the Knights of the Sable Church bow down to you as Lord of Hollows. Everyone is bowing down to you, even Unri herself. You use the flame to power yourself rather than let it power off of you. This is somewhat of a selfish ending, but not the worst ending. It's interesting, but not the best ending for the game in terms of good or bad. Perhaps morally grey. Perhaps this is why Miyazaki got George R.R. Martin to work on Elden Ring rather than Winds of Winter. George, where is Winds of Winter? It is said that you, as Lord of Hollows with the power of a god, essentially, will work towards fixing Londo by making it whole once again, which is a good thing, albeit. If you remember Lothric's words, let it all fade into nothing, like I told you to. I think I made it quite clear you had to remember that. If you've been listening to me, you would remember at the beginning I said the Age of Fire wasn't meant to be a permanent thing. I've also said this throughout to help you remember it, as it's important. And it needs to end eventually. Ideally, after Gwyn. Ideally, your character in Dark Souls 1 shouldn't have relinked the first flame. With the Age of Fire ended, you would bring in the Age of Darkness. It's not necessarily the end of time or end of anything apart from the Age of Fire. Because it's just mainly a beginning into the unknown. If you've been paying attention to how the world looks, you'd see that the world itself is dying and collapsing in on itself, because the Age of Fire has gone for far too long. Which is even more clear if you decide to relink the first flame. In Dark Souls 1, the flame engulfs your character and everything surrounding them. But in Dark Souls 3, it barely covers just your arms. Which is sad, because it's been reused over and over again, unnecessarily. Throughout Dark Souls 3, its main theme is to tell you to not relink the first flame, even though every NPC essentially tells you to. I personally wouldn't ever advise this ending, as to me it's one of the bad endings. The world is suffering each time the first flame continues burning. This is evident by the convergence of numerous lands and places, all from different times. The first flame's going to fade out anyways, because it can only be stretched out for so much. But leaving it to do so would cause more suffering, unnecessary suffering at that. The game is telling you, without ever saying it, to let the first flame go out. So, why don't you let it all fade into nothing?
Blip, blop, blip, blop. Splish, splash, splish, splash. Blip, blop, blip, blop. Splish, splash, splish, splash. Blip, blop.
Whew. Now we've come to the end of the video. If you're seeing this, I'm truly thanking you for watching this far. And please, like and subscribe. Share this to your friends if you want them to get an understanding of Dark Souls, and maybe to convince them to play themselves. If you've enjoyed this video, please tell me in the comments, as I'd like to know if I should keep doing these video essay-esque videos. As I said in the beginning, I wanted to make this as a thank you to From Software and the community for the games and the Jai Corporation on the way. The Dark Souls Trilogy is incredible. It will shimmer you blind even, make you want to make you want to give up, grant you incredible feelings of accomplishment, and scratch that itch you never knew you had. I simply cannot wait for From Software's next instalment, whether it's the DLC for Night Rain, which I really like, which is I still need to beat actually. I'm currently trying to beat the accursed blob of a Night Lord, Maris. I mean, I'll be happy with a new game entirely. But I'm even more happy to spend money on their games, as I know I'll get quality and I won't be disappointed. This video is not only fun to make, but difficult, so I appreciate that you've watched this far, and wish everyone a good morning, afternoon, evening and night. Remember, don't you dare go hollow, and don't forget to praise the sun. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
I'll stick you in my prayers. A fine dark soul to you.